and I pulled up to the intersection, two cars in, and I put my foot on the brake and I died in my car. It was like an IMAX theater. And it's 3D and it's perfect color and no sound, but it's perfect color and it's really, really crystal clear. And I said, I'm looking to the south, I'm on this pole, and I'm looking straight down, and I see a pile of blue people that are on a man, and I realize that it's me. Wow, I cannot imagine. It's so hard to describe what it felt like because it was just so crystal clear. I'm literally above looking at this whole thing happening. It was a huge, super tall, endless wall of this most indescribable light. It's completely quiet and it's completely peaceful. And it's a kind of quiet that I've never experienced before, but it's so peaceful. And inside of that residence, and I have no sense of time in this. I don't know how long it was. I can't measure it. There was no time. Well, the start of my experiences was on Valentine's Day of 2022. I had started the day at noon playing ice hockey. I've been playing hockey my whole life. And so I was playing about in a rink about 2 miles from the house. Started at noon and I was playing for about an hour and 10 minutes. And I play with a bunch of 24 to 25-year-old guys. I'm 64 now. And so I was playing, doing pretty good. They call me Moses because of my age. And after about 2.5 periods of playing hockey, I just felt terrible. I didn't know what was going on. I all of a sudden out of nowhere, I was lethargic and I could hardly skate anymore. And I thought I didn't know what it was. So I begged myself off the ice and thought I should just go home and call it a day. So I was in the locker room begging my skates off of my feet, and I was starting to feel pretty bad and wasn't real sure what was going on. I'm a real healthy man. I don't drink, I don't smoke. Been playing hockey all my life. I'm real active, and overall, I have no health issues. I haven't seen a doctor in years. So I was struggling, and I only lived a couple miles from the home, so I got all my stuff in my car and I was heading east on the final leg of my little short journey home. And I pulled up to the intersection, two cars in behind an old pickup truck at a yellow light. And I put my foot on the brake and I died in my car. Yeah, I had a Widowmaker heart attack right there in my car. And a Widowmaker basically is as it's named, my heart stopped beating. And with my foot on the brake and my heart had stopped, I slumped in my car, kind of below the wheel a little bit, and draped myself across the console and put myself into park. And so I was in park, it, two cars away from the intersection in my car, and I was dead. My heart had stopped beating. At this point in time, my heartbeat was what's called VFib, which meant it was jiggling but not beating. So technically, if I'm not going to get help, I will be a deceased person fairly shortly. So getting to the near-death experience, I was discovered by a gal behind me. Her name was Angel, believe it or not. And she had been behind me watching a video on her phone somebody had sent to her, and all people started honking at her. She didn't realize that everybody had left, and it had now been a full video. And I talked with her later, and she said it was probably about a 3 to 4 minute video. So at that point, we know I was in my car for about 3 to 4 minutes, or about what looks like four traffic lights. And then she really felt like somebody had tapped her on the shoulder, and she saw my seatbelt in the car, but nobody in it. And so she got out of her car and walked up and opened my door up, and there I was. I had been in there now for that period of time, and I was obvious I was completely gone. I did not have a heartbeat. I was not breathing, and I was purple. All the descriptions of a person that's had a cardiac arrest. And so I was too big for her to pull out. So she had waved down a fellow to help get me out. And they put me into the street and they started doing CPR on me. She did 200 compressions. A police officer came and did 400. And then another police officer came and did 650 compressions on me. All in all, I was about 1,300 compressions in the street. And the fire department still hadn't shown up after 10 minutes. So this is what connects the near-death experience to the veridical side, is that uh, when the fire department did show up, I was pretty much gone, and my heart was still in this V-fib rhythm, but they could not recall me. So they put me in the ambulance and put a machine on me that kept compressions and hustled me off to the nearby hospital. Went to a cath lab where they pushed out a blood clot in my LAD artery that had stopped my heart. So let's just fast forward a week. I walked out of the ICU on Saturday. This was Monday, and I walked out of there on Saturday. And I was pretty beat up, rather fragile in the brain. They were pretty at the time. They were very serious. I was going to have a serious anoxic brain injury, which I did not. And so they released me on Saturday. Walked out of there, and on the Monday, a week later, I had my first appointment with a cardiologist, and he gave me all the details of what had just happened to me, the cardiac arrest and how much damage I had and all that medical information. So Connie and I, my wife and I, we were driving home. She was driving and heading east on the same road. We pulled up to the exact same spot
Hmm.
that I had been a week before, although I didn't remember that. I was sitting, she was driving, and we were in that position in the traffic, and it struck me, but I didn't quite have a concept that that's where I was. I was still fuzzy, and I looked through her or excuse me, her driver window, and there was a light pole in the boulevard right there. And the moment I saw that light pole, something, it was like an electric shock. And I was wearing a vest at the time that would shock me if my heart stopped beating against it. At first, I thought it was that because it literally felt like an electric shock. It was a jolt. But it wasn't the vest. It was something. And it hit me. So it was rather mysterious to me. And I had spent a better part of 18 years training law enforcement and people like that. So I didn't know who my responders were. I didn't know who rescued me. I didn't know how long I was down. I had no idea about compressions. I really didn't know much about anything other than I had a widowmaker heart attack. So I'm still in the dark and in what had happened to me. But there, I look across the street and there's a fire department about 1,500 yards away. And I'm assuming, I'm like, it has to be them. I'm alive. Somebody had to have come quickly because it had to have been them. So I said to my wife, let's go thank them. So we pulled into the fire station and I knocked on the door. And the paramedic that was there, he looked out the window. And he looked at me and his eyes were big. And he comes out and he goes, "You," like that. And I just pointed at the intersection. He goes, "You were dead," just like loud and as excited as he could get. And I go, "Not hardly." He goes, "No, you were a corpse. Come on in." So he was pretty darned excited to see me, and I don't think too many people come back and thank him. So he invited my wife and I just in around the corner to the kitchen, and there's where all the other firemen of the station were at, a bunch of young guys, and an assistant chief was there who was my age, and he had since retired, but he'd been in the fire department business for 45 years, and they're all with their eyes just looking at me, and I could hear them whispering amongst themselves, like, "That's that Widowmaker guy. That's that Widowmaker dude," you know? And so we were sitting there, and the assistant chief had started asking me questions. He goes, "Do you realize how long you were down?" And I said, "I have no idea about anything. I'm pretty fuzzy." He said, "You were down a minimum of 20 minutes." And I was like, 20 minutes? He goes, "You were gone." And they called me at the scene. They said there's nothing more they could do. So they buttoned me up and sent me off to the hospital. And I went, whoa. And they said when they arrived to me, it was kind of a mix up because the 911 call had initially been a motorist in distress instead of a code. And so it took him over 10 minutes to get to me. And that's why the CPR happened for so long because it took the fire department forever. And that day, that fire department was on like a training day. So they weren't answering calls anyway, unless it was a serious one. So when they hear the motorist in distress, they just ignored the call until they got the tone that said there was a code, which was after about 10 or 12 minutes. I'm starting to figure it out that I'm like, wow, that's a long time, 20 minutes. And he says to me, what was it like? And I hadn't really had any profound thought or experience about it. Like I say, I was in the ICU. I woke up kind of in a dreamy state, real confused as to why I was there. But here I am, and I shut my eyes. And the only thing I can say is that it had to do with that electric feeling that I got in the car when I was in the same exact location as the week prior. But when I shut my eyes, it was like an IMAX theater. It was like an IMAX movie going on in my head, and it's still in my head now. It never's left. And it's 3D and it's perfect color and no sound, but it's perfect color and it's really, really crystal clear. And so I start to describe this to them with my eyes shut. I said, well, I'm looking down and I'm somehow or another I'm on a pole, this light pole that I had seen through my wife's window. And I'm on this pole and I'm looking down and I'm facing towards the south. I recognize that a mountain in the south called Santan Mountain. And I said, I'm looking to the south. I'm on this pole and I'm looking straight down and I see a pile of blue people that are on a man. And I see feet moving back and forth like that. And I realize that it's me because I see my feet. And I'm next to my car, and the blue people are on me. There's a police car on the other side of my vehicle, and another one in not quite in front, but in the intersection. They're sort of blocking traffic, and there's a fire engine in front of my vehicle with the letters E and the numbers 256 on it. I said, and I told him that, and then I said, there's an ambulance with M252 on it. And I'm just describing this. I'm describing where the cars are parked, where the fire truck is parked, where the ambulance is parked. And I said across the street, there's people on the sidewalk that are kind of standing there clustered, watching what's going on. And then I open my eyes and I look up and I said, and I see a white envelope. And I held my fingers up like that. I just see a white envelope. It's next to all the blue people, but it's sort of like trash. It's like a piece of just a piece. It's sort of kind of in the wind, It's sort of going like that. It's like somebody had thrown a wrapper away. And that's when they all went, "What?" And the man who had met me at the door, who's the paramedic, he said, "Come with us." And we walked around into the garage, and there was a fire truck that said E256 on it. And I went, whoa. And my wife said, did you say E256? I went, yeah. And I look and it's in there. It's still in my head today. And I'm literally looking at this fire truck with this E256 on it. And there's an ambulance there, but it said M256 on it. And I said, no, the ambulance said 252. I'm sure of it because I'm looking at it. And they're looking at me like, are you kidding me? And that's when they explained the mistake in the call that happened, that initially it was a distress call. So they were training, so they didn't roll their engine, but an engine and an ambulance from a far northern part of the town was called. And so they were on their way. And that's why they were on their way, but after the period of time that the police officers were doing all those compressions, they pushed what's called a code tone on their microphone, and everybody listens now. And so that's when that station that I was standing in, they said we heard the tone of a code, and they said, "Hey, we're right here." And so that's why they rolled across the street immediately after about 10 or 12 minutes with their engine, but the ambulance from the other department was on its way. So that's why when I said M252, I had described the other station's ambulance. And then I had described the station number six's engine. And I would have known that because I had no idea how these numbers work anyway. But the fact that I described the other engine and the two separate locations trucks They were looking at me like there's no way you could do that, but I had described them. Then the paramedic asked me, he said, "How's your shoulder?" And I went, "Well, this one's artificial." He goes, "No, the other one." And I felt it and I'm like, "Ow, it hurts." And he says, "It ought to." He pulled out of his engine, the engine with E256 on it, a paramedic's bag, and he opened it up. And he pulls a little tiny green Makita drill out. He says, "I drilled you with this." Whiz, whiz. And I went, "What?" He goes, "Dude, your bounce house was flat. You were a corpse. I got nothing. I got to get an IV in you." And so they drill into the bone marrow, into your shoulder. And also, I found out later, they'll also do one in your ankle. But this, they drilled right into my bone, the humerus bone, into the bone marrow. And that's where they insert a needle to get to a blood source for the IV, right? I didn't know anything about this. And so he throws me a paper that I had just described, and I catch it and I go, "What's this?" He goes, "Turn it over." And I turned it over and it was the needle set and the tube that was coiled and the nozzle that goes into the IV. And it's called an IO. I wish I can't say the long name, but it's a long name, but it's called IO. And that was the tube that connects the bone to the IV. And I'm like, "What'd you do with the paper?" And he said, "Dude," he goes, "you were a corpse. I got no time for litter laws." That's what he said. And he said, "I just threw it." And I said, "What I know about this?" And I had my eyes open. I'm describing this thing. I said, "What I know about this?" And they said, "There's no way. Kevin, you were gone. You were gone." They had shocked me several times, 5 or 6 times. I've got the tape of it where you can just see my heart's in this V-fib rhythm the whole time. Here's a shock, then here's V-fib the whole time, then here's a shock, and then another V-fib. It's called ventricular fibrillation, but that V-fib is a heart rate. It's not beating. So my heart's not beating. And um and I'm like, "How would I know?" And they just, "There's no way." And they described that I had described the other ambulance with compared to the engine that the station I was standing in, and there's just no way you would know that. I was getting emotional at this point, and everybody was emotional. My wife was already crying. And I shut my eyes again, and boom, there it is. And I'm describing it again. I go, "Yeah, there you are." And I said, "And there's a tall man with a blue shirt and a collar and three buttons and a logo on him." And I later found out, about 8 months later, that was the man that pulled me out of my car. That was his work shirt. He worked for a construction company, and that was his work. He was a supervisor, and that was his work shirt. And I had described all these things perfectly. And so I shut my eyes again. I was actually, now I was like morbidly curious. I'm digging for more, right? I'm like, I just shut my eyes and just exploring this video in my brain. And it's there it is. And it's like, wow, I cannot imagine. It's so hard to describe what it felt like because it was just so crystal clear. I'm literally above looking at this whole thing happening. Then I'm describing it again, and I said, "I'm still there, and I see these people." And I looked to the south, and I said, "In south, in town, you could see this mountain. It's called Santan Mountain. And we have these dust storms in Arizona where I live. They're huge, huge dust storms that come, walls of dirt that are several thousand feet high. And it's just a wall of dirt that comes across the town. And you look at your watch, and you're like, "I got 5 minutes to go home and put my umbrellas up." That's what it felt like, but it wasn't dirt. It was a huge, super tall, endless wall of this most indescribable light. I still can't describe it, but it was just this light that was like a wall, almost like a dust storm. But it was coming at me just like a dust storm would come at me, but it was light. It was this huge, indescribable wall of light. And as I'm in my mind's eye describing this, I said, "I'm in it now. I'm engulfed in this, what would be like I would be engulfed in a dust storm, but it's this light. Now I'm engulfed in it, completely engulfed. There's nothing else. The whole scene went away. There's no more trucks, there's no more ambulance, there's no more people. It's completely quiet and it's completely peaceful. And it's a kind of quiet that I've never experienced before, but it's so peaceful. and so quiet, and I'm lucid. I'm looking at my hands, and they're kind of they're vibrant of this light. It's sort of like the light is on my hands too, but there's nobody in it with me. It's not like I'm seeing my life pass before me like other people I know have. I don't have anybody that's, I see. It's not like my dog is there, anything of that, but I'm in this light. It's just, I'm engulfed in it, and it's quiet. And in it, there's no sound, but there's a type of a frequency, kind of like if you hit a low pitchfork, a really low, low, low one. It's that kind of a resonance. That's what it felt like. And inside of that resonance, and I have no sense of time in this because I don't know how long it was. I can't measure it. There was no time, and there was no emotions. I've been interviewed by several hospitals that were doing research on this kind of experience, and they asked me that if there was any time. I go, no time, no emotions. I wasn't afraid. I was just peaceful. And during this period of time where I was in this light, in this resonance, like I say, it was like a big, huge pitchfork that just kind of vibrated. It was my mother. My mother. It wasn't her standing there or anything. I didn't see her. It wasn't like English that I would recognize in my mother's pitch, but it was inside of me, and she communicated to me two words, or two sets of words, not yet, not yet, two times. And then on the second, not yet, it was boom, pitch black. And it was terror. I felt like I had just come off the bottom of a lake, and I had grabbed my air and I gasped for air. Like I had bitten, I had just gasped, like I just come off the bottom of a lake, and you run out of air and you finally get to the surface, you suck in air. That's what I felt like. But I'm in this pitch dark and no hearing. But it's terrifying to me. I feel like I'm in a closet of this total dark. And I started to scream three times my wife's name, Connie, like in a loud, crazy warrior scream, just screaming my wife's name, Connie, 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 like find me, come find me, that kind of a thing. On the third scream of my wife's name, nothing, nothing at all. I opened my eyes. I'm crying. I described this to the firemen. They're all crying, and they cannot believe what I had just described because it was exactly what the scene was. It was the down to the detail of the fire trucks and the ambulance where the police cars were faced, and the blue people and the white paper, the whole thing. I had described exactly. So I was worried at the time that I had lost my mind, that but they didn't explain the detail, right? So it left me feeling really, really kind of worried and perplexed, and it's kind of hard to describe the emotion of it, but I was absolutely perplexed as to what I had just seen and described to these five men and their boss and my wife. I had described this entire scene, and so I was worried that I had likely experienced an injury of some sort, but I couldn't rectify. It wasn't like I could make it up because it was accurate what I had described. So it was really a perplexing thing for me. And I held on to that for about 3 weeks, and it scared me to death. I didn't know what I had experienced. I didn't know what had happened to me, why I was able and what even bothered me more is that it never went away. That it's like a video that's constantly looping in my brain now, all the way to the light and the not yet. It's never gone away ever. And so in the initial stages, just going to sleep at night, it would be there. If I'd shut my eyes to go to sleep, boom, there it is. And it was sort of nightmarish to me because I was reliving this whole experience. Then I'd wake up in the morning and it was like it's a constant loop in my mind all night. And I'd wake up with it in the morning. And if I shut my eyes, there it is again. So I was becoming a little bit, not to say distracted would be light word, but it was bothering me. So I had gone back to the cardiologist about 3 weeks later. I had to do a checkup and a follow-up, and I'm definitely a cardiac patient now. And this is bothering me. I didn't even talk to my wife about how it was bothering me that I had this this loop in my head has not gone away. It's stuck in there. And I thought I was having a mind issue. And so I said to my doctor, I said, I have to say something. And I said, I don't want you to think I'm crazy, but I think I am. And he said, what? And I explained to him the details that I just explained to you and your audience, how I had seen this whole thing and I've described it to these firemen and how they were like, yeah, that's exactly what it was. And they described to me the differences of the different truck and the different ambulance and how there's no way I would have known about that mix up because I was gone. And he says, Kevin, you were definitely down. When I was brought to him, it was in what's called a cath lab. So when I left the scene, they had done all they could for me. And when I arrived at the hospital, I went straight into this cath lab where they went into my arm and he found this blood clot and he pushed out a 3-inch blood clot out of my heart, and then he put stents in, and at that moment I had an IV still in me, and he shocked me. And when he said when he shocked me, it took a couple, but when I came to, I had grabbed a nurse. I don't know if you can imagine this, but I met the nurse a year later, and she said I scared the bejesus out of her. But here's this guy that's all purple, hadn't breathed in 20 some minutes, and all of a sudden, blah, here I am screaming my wife's name, Connie, and I got a hold of her apparently. And my son worked in the ER, but he wasn't there the day I was there. But he said all of his friends said they could hear me down the hallway screaming my wife's name, and just crazy because when I came in there, they had a code blue. They assumed I would not make it. I was I was a guy that they were not planning on hearing from, let's put it that way. But when they brought me back and he opened up my artery and hit me again, I was screaming and I had a hold of this nurse and I was screaming my wife's name, Connie, and then they intubated me and they put me under, put a tracheal thing in me, and they put me into a light coma because they were certain I would have a brain injury. So he told me, Kevin, you were very much alive when that happened. That darkness that I experienced, he said, that's natural because I had not been with blood circulation. My heart had stopped beating. So my kidneys had failed. Most of my organs had already started to shut down. My lungs had collapsed, and all the blood in my retina had left. And in my hearing, all the blood that's in your eardrums had also left. So that's why I was not able to see or hear, and I was effectively blind and deaf at the moment. And so that darkness and that quiet in the dark black that I was experiencing, I was very much alive, but my body's systems hadn't caught up with it yet. And that's when then they put me under into this light coma, and that's how I made it through. So that's the experience that I still carry around with me. As I said, I've shared my story now with a little over a couple 100,000 people, and on different podcasts and personally. I welcome anybody who would like to share with me what their experience is. I've had it's countless people reach out to me and just share with me with their story, and it's been part of my purpose, I think, as the what I've gone through after this whole thing. A cardiac experience that I went through, it ruined my life. We lost everything. I couldn't work for a month. I'm sorry, I couldn't work for a year. And I've since had more cardiac issues, a lot of things that have come to be. But through it all, what I've shared with people is a message of hope, and that's my purpose in sharing my experience. There's no other really purpose that I have. That when I share it, so many people are searching, for what happens and what maybe has happened to a loved one, or maybe they're afraid themselves. And all I can say is that what I experienced was just what I just explained. It's nothing else other than my experience. And if it helps somebody, they're welcome to reach out to me. I've written a book. The book is called Not Yet, Not Yet. Tomorrow has just begun, and it's been well received. It's actually going to launch on March 30th. So if they would like, on March 30th, I would be happy to have you read my book or listen to or the ebook. It'll be on Amazon.com on the 30th. Not yet, not yet. Tomorrow has just begun. Or they can email me if they want. and you can email me at Kevin Mohatt, that's Kevin Mohatt, author at gmail.com. And I always respond to everybody that emails me. And, it's been nothing but joyful. And I rejoice in everything that's happened to me. We've lost everything. And in that, we've learned, and I have learned that that's what pain is about. Suffering is all about what you learn from it, and the common human condition that can happen to anybody that's anybody instantly. I was a healthy guy. Next thing you know, I'm dead in my car. It can happen to anybody. And what we do with that is really what my book is about. And that's one of the things I just wrote the book because I just wanted to share my story. And it is a story of there's a lot of pain in that story. And there's also an awful lot of glory in it. So anyway, I'd be honored if somebody, if you feel like emailing me, feel like you can. If not, pick up my book. Maybe you'll like that. If not, I wish you the best.